Your grandmother could cook an entire Christmas feast without reading a single recipe. No measuring cups, no cooking apps, no YouTube tutorials. Just memory, instinct, and hands that had done this 1,000 times before. These 15 recipes survived to world wars, strict rationing, and decades of change. They fed entire generations, built traditions, created memories that lasted lifetimes. But today, most of them are forgotten. I'm talking about real British Christmas cooking, the kind that filled terraced houses with the smell of roasting meat and warm spices, where every dish told a story of survival, creativity, and love. This isn't just about food. It's about a generation that turned almost nothing into everything. If you want to see how Christmas dinners were really made, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to learn, you won't find in any modern cookbook. Let's begin. Let's start with the centerpiece that changed everything: the roast turkey. But here's what nobody tells you. Before the 1950s, turkey was a luxury most families couldn't afford. The Christmas table was ruled by goose or chicken. Then something shifted. Rationing ended. Wages increased. And turkey became the ultimate status symbol. Butcher records from 1957 tell us something incredible. Turkey sales increased tenfold in just one decade. 10 times. That's not just a trend, that's a cultural revolution. A medium-sized bird cost 15 shillings per pound. That was serious money back then. Families saved for weeks just to afford it. Here's how your non prepared it. She'd make her own stuffing. Paxo mixed with chopped onions and fresh sage from the back garden. Simple, effective, perfect. Then came the secret. She'd rub beef dripping all over the skin, every inch, until it shone like polished brass. The result: a scent so powerful it drifted through entire streets, through open windows, past neighbors' houses. A smell that said one thing: Christmas has arrived. Children would press their faces against oven doors, waiting for that first glimpse of golden, crispy skin emerging from beneath the tinfoil. But for families who remembered the truly lean years, goose still held the crown. The fat from a roast goose was liquid gold. It hissed and bubbled in enamel trays, transforming every potato it touched into something worth fighting over. Housewives' journals from 1952 called goose fat Britain's best natural roast aid. Many families saved it all year, storing it carefully for the festive season. In homes where money remained tight, a large chicken became the hero. Around 5 shillings. Enough to feed a family of 6 with careful carving and strategic portion control. Whether it was turkey, goose, or chicken, the roast was never just about luxury. It was ritual, ceremony, something your non approached with her apron tied, hair perfectly set, and eyes laser-focused on perfection. Now stay with me here, because what I'm about to tell you might be controversial. The turkey wasn't the real star of Christmas dinner. The roast potatoes were. Let me explain. Your non kept beef dripping in a stone jar beside the stove. Not olive oil, not vegetable oil. Beef dripping. When Christmas morning arrived, she'd spoon that dripping into the roasting tray. Generous amounts, until the kitchen filled with a hissing sound that promised something extraordinary. The Ministry of Food Notes from 1950 officially recommended dripping as the thrifty cook's friend. It provided flavor no modern oil could ever match. And the cost? Potatoes were about 3 pence per pound. When meat portions ran short, these filled hungry stomachs. When that tray came out of the oven, something magical happened. The sound of the crunch echoed louder than any Christmas cracker. Families genuinely argued over who got the pieces with the best crispy edges. And honestly, most people forgot to save room for pudding after eating these. If you're already imagining the taste, do me a favor, tap that like button. We're just getting started, and the next dish is one that confused everyone outside Britain. Bread sauce appeared on almost every Christmas table, yet few people outside Britain ever understood it. Here's what it was: warm milk infused with cloves, bay leaves, and half an onion studded with cloves like a tiny Christmas ornament, thickened with breadcrumbs from the week's leftover loaves. For many families, it symbolized thrift transformed into comfort. The recipe dated back centuries but found new purpose during the post-war years when stretching a pint of milk genuinely mattered. Food writers in the 1960s called it the humble sauce that refuses to die. And for once, they were absolutely right. It simmered gently on the stove, filling the kitchen with the scent of nutmeg and onion. A quiet signal that the bird was nearly ready and the waiting was almost over. Here's something that will surprise you. Pigs in blankets arrived much later than most people remember. They were first recorded in women's magazines in the late 1950s. They became a national obsession by the mid-60s, right when bacon finally escaped rationing's shadow. A dozen chipolatas wrapped in bacon rashers cost just over 1 shilling and 6 pence. Yet they became the tiny luxury everyone expected. Your nan would lay them neatly along the roasting tin's edge so they crisped perfectly in the turkey fat. Their scent cut through everything, the sweeter smells of fruit cake, the pudding, all of it. For many children, they were the first things stolen from the platter. Often before Grace had even finished, the savory half of Christmas dinner told the story of post-war Britain better than any political speech ever could. It was a perfect mixture of thrift and pride, of creating plenty from limited resources, of making do while making it special. Behind every roasting tin and every chipped plate stood a grandmother who never measured anything, who knew by touch alone when the potatoes needed turning, who vividly remembered the years when fat and sugar were rationed by ounces, not by choice. Those smells meant Christmas more than any wrapped present ever could. Stuffing might not sound exciting now, but to a post-war British household, it was absolutely essential. The glue that held Christmas dinner together. Sage and onion was the undisputed champion. Made with stale bread grated fine, a handful of garden sage, and onions fried until soft in a spoonful of dripping. Paxo began selling pre-mixed packets in the 1950s, costing around 6 pence per box. It became a lifeline for busy cooks trying to balance family duties and work. But your nan, she never needed the packet. She knew the perfect ratio by pure instinct. And here's the genius move. She always baked a few stuffing balls separately, so every guest could fight over the ones with the crispy exterior. The scent of sage filled the air hours before the turkey finished cooking, wrapping every room in something warm and deeply familiar. No Christmas dinner was complete without a mountain of Brussels sprouts, even if half the family claimed to despise them. They arrived in shops loose on stalks, muddy, tightly packed. Sold at 3 pence per pound throughout the 1960s, your nan would peel them early in the morning, cross their bases with a paring knife, and boil them until just tender. Then she'd toss them in a knob of butter. If she could afford it, chopped chestnuts. Cookery magazines from 1971 described them as the vegetable Britain cannot escape. Yet somehow no plate looked properly complete without that pile of greens sitting there. The smell of overboiled sprouts might have haunted small houses across the nation, but in its own peculiar way, it belonged. As much as the carols, as much as the crackers. Alongside the sprouts came roast parsnips and carrots, glazed with dripping and honey. In colder northern towns where vegetables cost less than meat, these sweet roots often became the genuine star of the table. Old ministry price sheets show parsnips at 2 pence per pound during the 1950s, even cheaper in rural markets. Your nan would cut them lengthwise and roast them until their edges turned a beautiful amber color. Then she'd brush them with treacle or a drizzle of golden syrup. The smell mixed perfectly with the turkey's juices. That aroma signaled one thing: Christmas had reached its absolute peak. Don't click away now, because we're about to enter the part that everyone actually waited for. When the savory dishes cleared, the house seemed to pause. A moment of quiet anticipation. Then mince pies arrived, still warm from the oven, their sugary tops hiding rich fruit cooked in brandy and suet. The earliest versions actually used real meat centuries ago. But by the 1950s, the filling had evolved into pure sweetness and spice. Made from sultanas, raisins, candied peel, and the occasional splash of sherry if nobody was watching. Families baked dozens in batches. stored them in biscuit tins that clinked softly whenever someone sneaked one early. At 2 shillings for enough ingredients to make 20 pies, they represented economical happiness in its purest form. The smell of cinnamon and cloves drifted through every home, and even people who swore they were too full for pudding somehow managed to find room for one more. The National Food Survey of 1963 listed Christmas pudding among the 10 most prepared seasonal dishes in Britain, and with very good reason. This wasn't simply a dessert. It was the year's last ritual, made weeks in advance on Stirrup Sunday, soaked with brandy, tied carefully in muslin, then steamed for hours until the kitchen windows literally wept with condensation. The first recipes appeared in Victorian cookbooks, but by the 1960s, every single family had their own variation. Some used ale, some preferred stout, some had a coin inside for luck. A full-sized pudding cost under 4 shillings to make, cheaper than most shop-bought alternatives. When your non brought it in, still steaming and heavy, something special happened. The lights dimmed. Someone struck a match. Then brandy was poured over the top and ignited. Blue flames licked up the sides as the entire room erupted in spontaneous applause. For just a few shining seconds, the whole world seemed to glow. Trifle followed as the supposedly lighter option, though nobody ever truly believed it was light. Layers of sponge fingers soaked in sherry, jelly cubes trembling beneath bird's custard, a generous cloud of dream topping or whipped cream on top. Some families added tinned peaches or mandarins. Others swore by hundreds and thousands, sprinkled like confetti across the surface. It became a fixture of the 1970s table, partly because it looked genuinely impressive, partly because it could be assembled from whatever remained in the cupboard. At under 3 shillings for all the ingredients, it represented the practical luxury that defined that entire decade. The first spoonful always drew a smile. Sweet, cold, and just a little bit messy. Exactly as Christmas should be. By the time the sweet bowls were cleared, plates sat piled high and papers drooped everywhere. Someone usually fell asleep in front of the television. But for many families, dessert wasn't the end of Christmas. It was merely the halfway point. Once the regular trifle bowls disappeared, your non often revealed another version, richer, reserved exclusively for adults. Sherry trifle used the same basic ingredients but carried a quiet kick. A generous splash of Harvey's Bristol cream soaked the sponge fingers until they glistened. The jelly underneath set slightly softer, so spoons slid through with zero resistance. The taste was sweet and sharp simultaneously, warming the chest more effectively than any cup of tea. By the 1970s, bottles of sherry became as essential to December cupboards as fruit cake ingredients. The advertisements promised sophistication, but in reality, it was simply your non's way of ensuring the adults got their own moment of indulgence. Then came the buffet dishes. The ones that mysteriously appeared hours later when everyone had sworn they couldn't possibly eat another bite. Sausage rolls and cheese straws were absolute fixtures at every British Christmas from the 1950s onwards. They were crafted from leftover pastry, minced sausage, and a light brush of beaten egg that made them shine like amber. Housewives Weekly in 1954 called them party food for pennies. And they were absolutely correct. A single pound of pastry could stretch into 40 small rolls. Your non baked them in trays by the dozen. Their smell drifted through the house long after the pudding had cooled. Cold sausage rolls on Boxing Day were somehow even better. Flaky and salty, eaten while standing in the kitchen wearing slippers with paper hats still perched on heads. Not all treats required baking. Homemade sweets were a sign of care as much as careful budgeting. Coconut ice, peppermint creams, and fudge appeared in small bundles wrapped in wax paper and tied with colored string. They were remarkably simple to make. Condensed milk, sugar, and patience. That's it. Children would stir the mixture until it thickened, then press it into trays to cool on the windowsill. Woolworths sold the ingredients for absolute pennies. Almost every British child from the 1960s remembers sneaking a piece before it had properly set. Those little cubes of pink and white sugar were often wrapped as gifts for neighbors, living proof that generosity didn't require money, only time and love. The absolute showpiece of the entire season was the iced Christmas cake. Every grandmother had her own version, and in her mind, none could ever be improved upon. The fruit was soaked for days in brandy or strong tea, then baked slowly until the kitchen filled with the scents of nutmeg, molasses, and orange peel combined. When completely cooled, it received a coating of marzipan. Then came the thick royal icing that would crack slightly under the knife. By the 1970s, small plastic robins and snowmen decorated the top, often the exact same decorations carefully stored and reused year after year. Good Housekeeping's 1966 Christmas issue reported something remarkable: more than 4 out of 5 British households baked their own fruit cake that year, a tradition shared across the entire country regardless of income level. A full cake cost around 6 shillings to make in 1965. It lasted well into January, wrapped carefully in grease-proof paper and kept safe in biscuit tins. The first slice always tasted of patience. The last slice tasted of memory. When everything was finally over, quiet returned. Your nan would pour herself a drink, the one she always called my little treat, a snowball, made from advocaat and lemonade, sometimes with a bright red cherry bobbing cheerfully on top. It shimmered in the glass like liquid custard. Advertisements for warning snowball flooded British television throughout the late 1960s, promising glamour and sophistication. But at home, it meant something entirely different. It was the sound of that bottle being opened after all the washing up was finally done. The first genuinely quiet moment of the entire day. Adults clinked their glasses together. Children laughed at the foam, and for a brief time, the world outside, the strikes, the shortages, the cold weather simply faded away into nothing. By the time the fire burned low and the last tin of Quality Street had been picked completely clean, the house had fallen into its familiar Christmas silence. Paper crowns lay forgotten on chair arms, the television hummed softly in the background. Only the faint smell of cloves and pastry still lingered in the air. Every single recipe your nan made carried more than just flavor. It carried the complete story of a generation that learned to create celebration from simplicity long before ready meals and microwave dinners existed. It was these exact recipes, remembered without books, measured purely by touch, that transformed cold December evenings into something warm enough to last an entire lifetime. If this video brought back memories or taught you something you never knew, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment telling me which recipe was your absolute favorite. Or better yet, which one your own grandmother used to make. Hit that like button if your nan cooked exactly like this. And subscribe to this channel because we're bringing back more forgotten stories like this one. Stories that deserve to be remembered. Stories that built the traditions we still follow today. Until next time, keep those memories alive, and maybe, just maybe, try making one of these recipes this Christmas. Your nan would absolutely love that.